Welcome in, everybody, and welcome to Week 8 College Football Pick'em. These games are based on ESPN's College Football Pick'em game. These are 10 of the biggest games each week. We had quite a week last week in college football. We actually did pretty well here on our projections. We went 7-3 last week, so looking to improve on that record here. We've got some big games this week, so let's get into it. First game up on the agenda is number 21, Cincinnati versus SMU. This one is a noon kickoff, and it will be seen on ESPN. Let's take a look at Cincinnati first, since they're the visiting team. The Bearcats, they are coming off a bye week, and they have won 5 straight, so they are playing well overall. This offense, they have been very well balanced, and they currently rank top 5 in the American Athletic Conference in rushing and passing yards per game, so they've shown an ability to move the ball through the air and on the ground. Quarterback Ben Bryant, Luke Fickell says he is hopeful that Ben Bryant will be a participant this weekend. He is working through a concussion that he suffered in the past, I believe the game before their bye week. The defense for this team has been playing very well. Obviously, we know Cincinnati made it to the playoff last year, but this is a different team. Their defense has really been the hallmark of this team. They are currently allowing the second fewest yards per game in the American Athletic Conference, and they're holding opponents to the third fewest points per game in the conference as well. They also have 23 sacks on the year, which is one of the best marks in the country, so they've shown an ability to get after the quarterback, which is always a good thing to do. Taking a look at the Mustangs now, they are coming off a win over Navy after losing 3 straight games, so they're slowly working on getting back on track. This offense is built on the passing game. They are a very pass-first team. They are currently 4th in the country in passing yards per game. On the defensive side of the ball for SMU, they are allowing 30 points per game and over 200 rushing yards per game, so some potential vulnerabilities there, especially in the rush defense for the Mustangs. Taking a look at the ESPN Football Power Index, Cincinnati has a 60.1% chance to win this game, and I'm going to go ahead and agree with the FPI. I'll take Cincinnati to win this one on the road, and I think their winning ways will continue. Let's take a look at our next game now. And it is Toledo versus Buffalo. This one is a 1 o'clock kickoff, and it can be seen on ESPN+. This is the first time I've broken down Maction all year, so let's get into this one. Toledo, they have won 3 straight, and their offense is playing very well. They're currently ranked at the top of the MAC West, I believe. They're ranked 4th in total offense in the MAC and 2nd in rushing yards per game. They also lead the conference in points per game, so the offense has been one of the best in the conference. On the defensive side of the ball, they are also one of the better units in the MAC. They are currently 2nd in the conference in yards allowed per game and 3rd in points allowed per game. Toledo really is a well put together team, and at this moment, both this year and last year, is really the class of the MAC. Taking a look at Buffalo now, they were off to an 0-3 start, but they have turned things around and they have won 4 games in a row, and they are sitting 1st in the MAC East, so this could potentially be a MAC title game preview here. The offense for the Bulls, they are averaging nearly 400 yards per game and approximately 30 points per game. This offense has shown an ability to beat teams through the air and on the ground, so that sort of dynamic ability to do both is definitely a plus. On the defensive side of the ball for the Bulls, they are holding opponents to 24.4 points per game, which is 2nd best in the MAC. The Bulls allow an average of 168 yards per game on rushing defense. According to ESPN's Football Power Index, Toledo has a 55.1% chance to win this game, and I think this will be a good game, and I don't know how many eyeballs are going to be on it given that it is the MAC and it is on ESPN+, but I think these are 2 good teams, and I think these are teams that might not be on the national radar, but they're talented in their respective conference. My projection, I'm going to take Toledo to win this game. I think Toledo is at a better point, but then again, this could go either way. Obviously, the FPI slightly leans Toledo, but it's not by much, only 55%, so this would be a good one to tune into if you're a fan of Maction. Next game on the docket, it's some SEC action. This is number 7, Ole Miss versus LSU. This one is a 3:30 kickoff, and it can be seen on CBS. Let's take a look at those Rebels. Ole Miss is currently undefeated, and they are coming off a big win over Auburn. On offense for Mississippi, they are averaging 40 points per game and over 500 yards per game. That's not something that's too unusual for a Lane Kiffin-coached team. This offense can run the ball at a very high level. They are currently averaging over 270 rushing yards per game, which is very impressive, especially with the transfer of Zach Evans. However, Evans has not even been their lead rusher, I don't believe. I believe they have a freshman whose name escapes me at the moment. I do apologize, who has been an absolute dog for this team. On defense for Ole Miss, they are allowing 17.3 points per game, and they have forced 19 sacks on the year. Both of those rank top 3 in the SEC, and we know how good those defenses are down south. Let's take a look at LSU. They have a big opportunity in front of them. They're sitting only with one loss on the year. Well, excuse me, one conference loss on the year after beating Florida last week. The Tigers offense, they have been one of the better passing offenses in the SEC. They rank 5th in passing yards per game. If you look at the statistics for quarterback Jaden Daniels, he has improved very much from a year ago. He has already thrown for the same number of touchdown passes to this point this year as he did all of last year. So much improvement. It's good to see out of him. On the defensive side of the ball, they are allowing 21.3 points per game, and they are 5th in the SEC in total yards allowed. So LSU is obviously going to have some talented pieces on their defense, but the front 7 is really going to be key here for LSU's defense. If they cannot stop Ole Miss's rushing attack and slow that down, they won't stand much of a chance. Taking a look at the Football Power Index, they actually like LSU here with a 51.3% chance to win this game. Personally, I would probably chalk that up to home field most likely. And if you watched one of my episodes a few weeks back, I took LSU to beat Tennessee stupidly, and I'm not going to fall for that again. I'm taking Ole Miss to win here. I'm not going to be lulled into, believing in Death Valley and all that stuff. I think Ole Miss is the better team, and I think it's really that simple. I think their ability to run the ball is going to be overwhelming, and I think that they will get the win in Death Valley. Our next game on the docket is some Pac-12 action here. It is number 9 UCLA versus number 10 Oregon. This one is a 3:30 kickoff, and it can be seen on Fox. Let's take a look at those Bruins. They have been very impressive this year. You could even say the best team in LA. But that will be decided later on down the road. This offense is averaging 41.5 points per game and over 500 yards per game. Quarterback Dorian Thompson-Robinson has a top 5 QBR in the country, and he is playing at a very high level, some of the best football he has ever played. Not to mention the running game for UCLA is also averaging over 200 yards per game, with running back Zach Charbonnet leading the charge for the Bruins. On the defensive side of the ball, UCLA is holding opponents to 22.7 points per game and the fewest yards per game of any team in the Pac-12. Looking at the Ducks now, they have won 5 straight games, and they're playing really good football. They're sort of slowly but surely healing their reputation after a 49-3 pounding in Week 1. The Ducks offense is playing at a high level, and they rank atop the Pac-12 in total yards per game and rushing yards per game. The Ducks are averaging 42 points per game, so 2 high-powered offenses being featured in this one, with quarterback Bo Nix possessing a top 10 QBR in the country, and also 2 talented veteran quarterbacks here, Bo Nix and Dorian Thompson-Robinson alike. On defense, the Ducks are holding opponents to 28.8 points per game and 373 yards per game. This rush defense is holding opponents to under 100 yards per game. However, Oregon's secondary is allowing the most passing yards per game in the Pac-12. Let's take a look now at what ESPN's Football Power Index thinks. They like Oregon in this one with a 71.4% chance to win this game. I'm going to go ahead and take the Bruins. I like UCLA to get the win here. I think with Oregon's question marks in the secondary, and I think the level of play that Chip Kelly has this team playing at, and how well Dorian Thompson-Robinson is playing, I think UCLA will just be able to outscore the Ducks, but I think Oregon will get their fair share of licks in there. They're going to take some shots. They're going to put up some points as well. So I think this one could be a high-scoring game, but I will take UCLA to get the win. We have some Big 12 action now on the docket. It's number 20 Texas versus number 11 Oklahoma State. This one is a 3:30 game on ABC. Let's take a look at the Longhorns now. They're playing very well, and they have won 3 straight games. Their offense has been hit or miss so far this season. They're averaging 36.7 points per game, and they rank 8th in yards per game in the Big 12. The offense has shown an ability to score points. They've they've had games where they've scored in the 40s, and they've had games where they've scored in the 20s. So that's what I'm referring to when I say, hit or miss. On defense for the Longhorns, they are holding opponents to 18.3 points per game, which ranks third in the Big 12. This defense is also holding opponents to the second fewest yards per game in the Big 12. This pass defense is also holding opponents to the fourth fewest passing yards per game. So it definitely seems that Texas's defense has been a huge factor in their success so far. Taking a look at the Cowboys now, Oklahoma State, they suffered their first loss of the season last week against TCU in a tough overtime matchup. They're looking to bounce back here. On offense, this team is averaging 44.3 points per game, which ranks 9th in the country. Quarterback Spencer Sanders is a veteran of this program, and he is averaging nearly 300 passing yards per game. On defense, the Cowboys are allowing 27.8 points per game and over 400 yards per game. Oklahoma State's pass rush has been very effective. However, their secondary has allowed over 300 passing yards per game. That is not good. Looking at the Football Power Index, they like Texas to win this one. They give them a 66% chance to win this one. I'm going to have to agree with that. I will take Texas to get the win. I think Oklahoma State's weaknesses in the secondary could be very problematic for them, but if they're able to get effective pressure on Quinn Ewers, then that's a real leveling factor there. So we'll have to see how this one goes, but for now, I will take Texas to get the win. Alrighty, moving on to the next game here. It's Memphis versus number 25 Tulane. This one is a 3:30 game and it can be seen on ESPN2. Let's start with those Memphis Tigers. Memphis is coming off a tough 4-overtime defeat against East Carolina. The offense for the Tigers is currently averaging 35.3 points per game, and they rank 30th in the country in passing yards per game. This is an offense that ranks in the middle of the pack in the American Athletic Conference, with their strength being through the air on offense. Looking at the defensive side of the ball, that is a greater weakness for the Tigers, unfortunately. This defense is allowing an average of 30.1 points per game and 419 yards per game. This pass defense especially allows over 300 yards per game, and that ranks dead last in the AAC. This run defense is much more stout, so depending on how Tulane comes out, that will impact Memphis's defensive success. Looking at Tulane now, they have won 3 straight games, and as I just mentioned, they do find themselves in the top 25. They are averaging 33 points per game on offense and 420 yards per game. This offense is really in the middle of the pack in the conference in both rushing and passing yards per game, so they don't really jump off the page doing either, but they have been consistent. They've been doing enough to win games, and that's what matters. They do have a slight tendency to run the ball on first downs, but they have an overall balanced offense, as I just mentioned. On defense, Tulane is holding opponents to 15.9 points per game. That's second in the conference. And they're holding opponents to under 300 yards per game, and that is first in the conference. Looking at the Football Power Index, Tulane has a 68.2% chance to win this game, and I'm going to take the green wave to get this one. Tulane will get the win here. I think they possess strength defensively. I think Memphis has a good passing attack, but Memphis has a lot of liabilities on defense, and that could be a troublesome spot for the Tigers, but I'll take Tulane to win this one. Alrighty, here's our next game of our pick'em here. This is BYU versus Liberty. This one is a 3:30 game, and it can be seen on ESPNU. Let's take a look at those Cougars first. They have lost 3 out of their last 5 games, and they're looking to get back on track. Kind of had high expectations for this team, but they've sort of fallen off recently. The offense for the Cougars is averaging 37.4 points per game and 425 yards per game. The passing game for BYU is averaging 277 yards per game, and they've only taken 9 sacks on the year. So I know I highlighted the strength of their offensive line, so they're living up to that for the most part. The rushing game ranks towards the bottom among independent teams. So this offense is a pass-first unit, so definitely a strength is through the air as opposed to on the ground. The defense for BYU has been causing some issues. This defense is allowing an average of 402.4 yards per game and 30.3 points per game. The rushing defense is allowing close to 200 yards per game, and the passing defense is allowing over 200 yards per game. The defensive difficulties could potentially be a problem for the Cougars. Taking a look at Liberty now, they are playing good football and they have won 4 games in a row. This offense is averaging 30 points per game, which is not electric by any means, but it's been enough for them to win games. The passing game averages over 223 yards per game and is ranked top 50 in the country in rushing yards per game. The defense for Liberty is one of the best among independent teams. They allow 22.6 points per game and 340 yards per game. They also have 28 sacks on the season, which leads the nation. According to ESPN's Football Power Index, BYU has a 54.3% chance to win this game, but I'm going to take Liberty here. I think that the key matchup here is BYU's offensive line versus Liberty's defensive line, 2 nationally ranked units, 2 highly touted units. Who is going to break first? They both have very talented pieces, but who's going to blink first? Who's going to give up that big sack? Who's going to, give Jaron Hall that extra 2 seconds to find a man downfield? That will be the difference in this game. Moving on to our next game, it's Minnesota versus number 16 Penn State. This is the annual whiteout game. This is at 7:30 p.m. and this is on ABC. Let's take a look at the Golden Gophers first. Minnesota has dropped 2 straight games after a hot start. This offense is averaging 34.5 points per game and 442 yards per game. The rushing game is averaging 227 yards per game, and that is 15th best in the nation. Quarterback Tanner Morgan is listed as questionable, and he is a major piece of their offense with his veteran leadership. Running back Mohamed Ibrahim has been playing well. He's been playing great so far, averaging 6.7 yards per carry, and he could cause some problems for a Penn State defense that struggled with a Michigan run game. On defense for the Golden Gophers, they are allowing 11.7 points per game, and that ranks 4th best in the entire country. This defense holds opponents to 263 yards per game. The rushing defense allows a little over 100 yards per game and has only allowed 3 rushing touchdowns all year. Looking at Penn State now, they did lay an egg on the road last week. They look to bounce back in a whiteout environment that is one of the best in college sports. The offense is averaging 31.5 points per game, and that ranks 96th in the country. They are averaging also 414 yards per game, which is in the middle of the pack in the Big Ten. A big struggle point for this offense is on 3rd down. They have a 3rd down conversion rate of 33.8%, which is towards the bottom of the conference. And just to revisit Minnesota for a second, Minnesota converts approximately 66% of their 3rd downs, so twice as many as Penn State. That could be a problem if Minnesota can keep the sticks moving and stay on the field. Penn State will have to get off the field as a defense. Speaking of Penn State's defense, they are allowing 378 yards per game and 19.2 points per game. With a questionable Tanner Morgan, this run defense will be key for Penn State, as we can expect a lot of carries if Tanner Morgan cannot go. The rush defense is currently allowing 136.2 yards per game. That ranks 10th amongst Big Ten teams. Looking at the Football Power Index, ESPN does like Penn State, giving them a 62.5% chance to win this game. I'm going to go with the Nittany Lions, although I do not have overwhelming confidence. I do think the home field advantage and the setting does help them out, and if Minnesota's without their starting quarterback, that could create more of a difficulty. But I would not be surprised at all if Penn State loses this game. All right, the next game on the docket in the prime time slot, it's UCF versus East Carolina. This one is at 7:30 p.m. and it can be seen on ESPNU. Taking a look at the Golden Knights, UCF has won 4 straight games. On offense, they're averaging 41.3 points per game and over 500 yards per game, including over 260 rushing yards per game, which is one of the best marks in the nation. Quarterback John Rhys Plumlee has been a major component of this offense, as he is the leading passer and the leading rusher for this team, so definitely a huge weapon for the Knights. On defense, UCF is averaging 14.3 points per game allowed, and that leads the AAC, and 339 yards per game allowed, and that is 3rd best in the conference. So they have got one of the best offenses in the conference and one of the best defenses in the conference. Gus Malzahn has this team playing at a very high level. Let's take a look at the Pirates now. They did win a close 4 overtime game last week, and they have been hit or miss so far this season. The offense for the Pirates is averaging 32.9 points per game, and they are over 470 yards per game on average. The passing game for ECU is impressive, averaging over 300 yards per game. The The ECU run game also ranks top 5 in the conference in rushing yards per game, and on the defensive side of the ball, they allow 388 yards per game and 24.6 points per game. The rush defense is one of the best in the conference as they hold opponents to just 109 yards per game on the ground. That is the key matchup here. Can East Carolina slow down UCF, keep this game lower scoring? We saw UCF hang 70 in recent weeks, so they definitely have an ability to just outscore you and outgun you. So if ECU can keep this game close, they'll have a chance. According to ESPN's Football Power Index, UCF has a 71.8% chance to win this game. And I'm going to go ahead and agree with the Football Power Index. I will take UCF to get the win. And in our final game of these 10 of the week, we have number 17 Kansas State versus number 8 TCU. This one is at 8 p.m. and it can be seen on Fox Sports 1. Let's take a look at Kansas State. They are coming off a bye week, but they have played very well leading up to it. They won 3 in a row leading up to that bye week. On offense for the Wildcats, this team is averaging 28.7 points per game and 403 yards per game. This offense is very run heavy. They average over 240 rushing yards per game. On defense for the Wildcats, they are allowing 354 yards per game and 16.7 points per game. The passing defense is one of the best in the Big 12, allowing an average of 221 passing yards per game. The secondary will be tested with a very pass-happy, very effective offense for TCU. But let's take a look at TCU. They are coming off a huge win over Oklahoma State, and at the moment, they are the pride of the Big 12. They look to keep their momentum going on offense. The Horned Frogs have been one of the best units in the country. Everybody gives loves to the Tennessees of the world, the Ohio States of the world, but TCU is right up there statistically. They rank 3rd in total yards per game in the nation with 526 yards per game. Their passing attack averages 297 yards per game and a rushing game that averages over 200 yards per game. That is a deadly combination, folks. On defense for the Horned Frogs, this team is currently allowing 26.5 points per game and 400 yards per game. The rushing defense will be key for TCU, and the run defense currently allows 135 yards per game, and that's right in the middle of the pack of the Big 12. So it's really 2 different style offenses here. One of them that can really sling it deep, but also has an ability to run the ball well. And one that's really run-centric. I don't think Adrian Martinez, throwing the ball is what Kansas State wants to do. So if they get down and they have to start throwing it all over the field, that is not a situation they want to be in. Looking at the Football Power Index, TCU has a 65.9% chance to win this one, and I'm going to take that. I like TCU to get the win here. I think Kansas State's a good team, but I think they're a little more one-dimensional offensively. I think TCU's a little more dynamic, and I think that'll definitely bode well for the Horned Frogs. That's going to do it for my Week 8 predictions. We're already Week 8, more than halfway through the season, the regular season at least. Hard to believe. I want to thank everybody for watching. All the stats and info in this video were courtesy of ESPN. Everybody go out and enjoy the college football weekend, and I hope your team wins, unless, of course, they're playing my team. Have a great weekend, everybody, and we'll see you here next week.